بسم الله.
Good afternoon and welcome to another session with Arsh, Ellahi. So, first of all, I want to say thank you to all those that sent us supporting messages and almost like saying thank you for providing advice last week. Lots of you found it useful and lots of you found it quite inspiring that a young Asian Muslim has done quite well in property and business within the West Midlands. And I thought I'd follow up on that today. So first of all, I should say that if you are interested in asking a question, you can telephone the studio by calling 01902 972 150, or you can WhatsApp us in the studio and I'll try and read out any questions that you ask. 07440 420 432. So today I'm going to be answering. I've got loads of notes, just so you know. I thought, well, what's the best way that I can get some knowledge and also value out to the listeners of the show? And I thought, well, first of all, we'll start by bringing in some guests. So I'm hoping to be joined by a guest who's got a very successful business. I don't want to give away too much, but he should be joining us halfway through the show. And he's built quite a large business and it's been ever evolving. And I'm hoping that he shares how they've diversified into other businesses, which will hopefully give you an idea as to how you can start structuring your business and how you can start moving forward with it as well. So recapping on some of the stuff that we went through last week, how to get started in property. One of the main questions that was consistently being asked, even after the show, was how do we get involved in property? Now, I read a quote and it says, the journey is always greater than the destination. Let me say that again. The journey is always greater than the destination. How many times have you done something and you've said you've worked your way through it and you've been working towards something, and when you get to it, you almost feel like it's anticlimax. Oh, is this it? And you thought, I've worked so hard for it. I've stressed. I've I've sweated over it. I've lost sleep over it. And as a result, I've got here now, and what do I say? Or what do I do? So remember, when you're doing something, you've got to enjoy it. And I'm going to be talking to you about today how to get started in a property. And I thought that quote was quite poignant because when you're going through that journey, when you're getting involved in property, enjoy every moment of it. First tip. Why? What's your reason why? Why have you wanted to get involved into property? Now, seems like an obvious answer. Everyone wants to make money. Now, for me, money is not the be-all and end-all. And I would seriously suggest that you consider that, because for those that think that money is the be-all and end-all, money actually just buys us possessions. What we actually all desire is time and freedom. And when we think about those two things, time and freedom, they're things that actually money cannot buy. Money allows us, and money gives us choices. Money gives us the choice so that we can decide if we've got enough money, we don't have to go to work. If we've got enough money, we decide where we go, who we go, and and when we go. So when we're looking at property, my first question, or when I'm even starting any business, my question that I'm asking myself is why? Why have I wanted to do this? And I start to map out where I want to go and where I want to be. You'll also kind of ask yourself, what are your key strengths? Now, when I started business, my key strength, if I'm honest, was my ability to communicate quite easily. I like to think I'm quite good at negotiating. I like to think that I'm quite good at communicating with people. So when I was looking to get into property, I knew that instantly as a result of having a good communication, and good negotiation skills, I could negotiate well with homeowners. I could negotiate well with estate agents. Think about all the things that you do. Now, people always say that, you should learn a script, or you should get a good script and understand it really well. Now, for me, I'm going to say something slightly different. If someone comes to me with a script, I kind of switch off. And the reason why I switch off is just purely because I want to speak to that person. I want to get to know that person. And therefore, I want to make sure that if they've got a script, they're not really talking to me. It's almost like a robot. How many times have you been, and how many times have you been on a website and you've come across like a chat bot? That's not real interaction as far as I'm concerned. No, the real interaction is speaking to people, understanding people, and getting to know that person. So you've got to work within property. You've got to work within your strengths. Now, some of you may not want to deal with tenants, for argument's sake. They don't want to deal with tenants having to report anything such as maintenance issues. They don't want to have to deal with any sticky conversations that a tenant can't afford rent, or so and so forth. So you think, well, I may outsource that, and I'm going to outsource that to someone like a letting agent or estate agent. So, by the way, if you're finding this interesting, or if you've got any questions, please WhatsApp us in the studio, or send us a message, or feel free to call us and we can get you on air live. Going back to your why, it will all revolve around you and your circumstances. So your reason why may be that I want to create a better legacy for me and my family. Now, my why, admittedly, is my wife and my children. I've got 2 very young kids. I mentioned them last week. I think my wife mentioned them on the show yesterday as well. We've got a 6-year-old and we've got a 5-year-old. Now, my why is to ensure that those 2 little girls have the best life that they can ever have. So when I get out and go to work, it's not a case of I'm going to go make money. I'm going to create a legacy so that those girls can do whatever they want when they want without asking anyone to do that. So when it comes down to your circumstances, it comes down to, have you got funds to invest, or have you not got funds to invest? And by the way, there's no right or wrong answer here, by the way, because it will all come down to you and your personal circumstances. Someone may come to me and say, Arsh, I've got a large pot of cash and I want to invest in property, and that's great. But also, that pot of cash will only determine a few factors. It will determine things like, where are you going to invest? So I'll give you an example. Just imagine that you've got a pot of, let's say, £20,000 or £30,000. Now, that £20,000 or £30,000 is only going to take you so far. And if they're based in London, £20 or £30 is not going to buy you a lot. However, if you come further north and you head towards, let's say, the Midlands, that £20 or £30 could act as a deposit towards a single let property. Go further north and £20 or £30 could act for another property, but maybe slightly larger. But again, this is what it all comes down to. Your circumstances will determine where you invest, how you invest. If you don't have funds, this is where you have to be strategic. And last week we mentioned a couple of other strategies about how to lease properties, how to take properties, and how you can actually get involved in property with no or little money. So your circumstance will determine which route you take. And we could probably apply that to life and business in general. Tip number 4 is your risk profile, because your risk profile will determine what kind of investments you make and what kind of decisions you make as well. So do you like risk, or are you quite adverse to risk? Now, I'm going to go back to my story of me growing up. My father was a risk-averse person who was always told that you don't do if you buy a property, you make sure that the outgoings are covered first. Make sure that you've got enough rent coming in to pay the outgoings. Now, that seems like simple economics. Let's face it, if you go to a shop, you can't buy something unless you've got the funds to pay for it. Now, in the same respect, he was very risk averse. He wanted to ensure that he always had enough funds coming in to pay the funds going out. When you're risk averse, you will want to keep things quite simple, quite relaxed. When we're talking about quite simple, quite relaxed, things like a single let. So a standard house that you rent out to a simple family, and you keep it quite simple in that respect. When you're more risk, when you like risk, you may start to do a little bit more in terms of, are you going to then purchase something like a multi-let? Are you going to start looking at developments? Are you going to build extensions? So these are all the things, because these become a little bit more riskier. When you're dealing with developments, you're no longer only renting out to a family. First, you've got to build the thing. That's where you need builders in place. That's where you're going to have all kinds of things in place. I think there's a couple of questions coming through. So if you'd like to ask, feel free to ask away. And then finally, the one thing I will say for this part is that if you're looking to get involved in any business, and if you're looking to get involved in any property, now this may sound extremely strange, but the one thing I would say is that don't be afraid to say yes to everything from the outset. Now, the reason why I say that is because just imagine that you're going out, you're about to start a business. Now, if someone comes to you with an opportunity, and you're thinking, well, hang on, I'm not 100% sure about this yet. You've got to say yes to it straight away. Now, you're not committing to buying anything. You're not committing to doing anything right now. But what you're doing, you're giving yourself that opportunity. Does that make sense? Because what you're doing is giving yourself the time to appraise the opportunity. Someone came to me many years ago and they said, Arsh, I want to sell a 17-bed care home. And I was sat in the office and the guy says, do you want to buy it? And I said, yeah, absolutely. Why not? And then my business partner, who's my brother, he looked at me and he goes, whoa, 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 whoa. I said, what's wrong? And he goes, you've just agreed to buy that guy's house off him. I said, no. I said, I've agreed to entertain a conversation about his property. If I said no, what do you think would have happened to that opportunity? Now think about this for a second. If I said no to him, would he have still wanted to carry on with this? Would he have gone somewhere else? Would he have found someone else to buy that property? Would they have offered more money? Would I have lost that opportunity? I've said to him, well, guys, I'll tell you what I'd like. I'd like the opportunity to, first of all, appraise the opportunity. I'd like the opportunity to come and have a further chat with you. And I'd need that, for the next 7 days. And we agreed an exclusivity period for that period. So, when you're talking and when you're negotiating, don't be afraid to say yes from the outset. You can go back and renegotiate all the time. That happens all the time. However, by saying no, you've closed the door, and you've closed the door from the outset. So I'm going to give you a little tip today. I'm going to say, become the magnet. Now, it sounds strange. Why do I want to become a magnet? Sounds a bit silly, actually. Why do I want to become a magnet? By becoming the magnet, you attract all the opportunities. By saying yes to everything, you're getting to see the opportunities first. You're becoming that window of opportunity. After you've become that window of opportunity, you'll see how many opportunities you're presented with. And then you can say, you know what, to be fair, I like that one. I don't like that one. I'm going to explore this further. I think I'm going to buy this one. Does that make sense? So I'm going to try and break the show down into certain segments. So the first part was how to get started in property. If you've got a question, again, please feel free to If you've got a question, please feel free to send in to the studio and I'll answer as many as we can. I'm also going to talk about business, and I'm also going to talk about why we should start business, and more importantly, what it can do for you and your property, you and your family. Now, when we talk about business, it comes in various shapes and forms. We can have a small business, we can have a medium-sized business, and we can have larger businesses, but it all starts from somewhere. These great big trees that we see today have all come from very small oats. I think that's the right saying. Apologies if it's not. But they all start from a seed. Does that make sense? So everywhere has to come from an idea. Now, problem that we've got, and I speak openly when I say the Asian community, is that when I go to another Asian or another Muslim with an idea, the first thing that they say is that, no, that won't work. And they haven't really heard the opportunity. Have you experienced that yourselves? Just cast yourself back to when you thought you had an idea and someone said, well, no, that's not going to work. So-and-so's already doing it. Why are you trying to copy them? But in actual fact, what they're doing is that they're putting into your mind a segment which almost is creating a fear of failure. Now, for me, I do not. I embrace the fear of failure because that's what strives me forward. That's what gets me moving forward. The fact that I don't want to fail. The fact that I said to myself, I refuse to fail. And I've always got that in my mind. So when someone says to me that, Arsh, I don't think you can do that. I don't want you to give up on it. I don't want you to give up on that opportunity. I want you to literally say, okay, that person has said no. But in actual fact, I'm going to run with it. The couple of things that you need to take into consideration, especially when you're starting out in business. And again, I should put a disclaimer in there that these are my personal opinions and I'm not offering business advice, by the way, is that you've got to ensure that whatever you're doing, you're going to start from the ground upwards and you're not going to just go running in like a bull in a china shop. And the reason why I say that is just take it slowly but surely. If you listened to my show last week, we talked about how I started a business from scratch. If you remember, I started talking about the market stall, and I didn't have the funds to start that business. So I had to think of other strategic methods to acquire the goods that I was going to sell. So we can do this and we can be very strategic in our approach. Now, I will say this, that we had a few younger members listening to our show last week and they said, well, I'm 13 years old, I'm 15 years old. And that really inspired me because I thought if we can teach them how to learn about business from a very young age, when they get to that age of 17 and 18 or even 19, 20 years old, they'll be ready to start moving forward. So here's my first few tips as to how to get started in business. Do some research on your segment. Do some research on your business. Just to understand who else is doing this. Because the last thing that you want to do, and I'm not trying to put you off here, by the way, is that I want you to understand exactly who's operating within your field so that potentially you could contact them, potentially you could do some business with them in the future from a business to business point of view. But more importantly, when doing research, understand every bit of part about that business. I'll give you some examples. Now let's touch on some highly populated areas of business. Quite a few of the listeners on the show will also have like restaurants. So how many restaurants are there around the West Midlands? There must be hundreds, if not thousands. Now, starting from that point alone, if you were to start a business and if I was to say to you, well, why do you want to start a business? There's hundreds, if not thousands of them out there. One thing I want you to do is get a piece of paper right now, and I'm going to give you a bit of a challenge. And I'd like you to WhatsApp us into the studio, even a screenshot, or take a photo of it and screenshot it and send it to me. I want to know what is your unique selling point. So in business, you use this term called a USP, a unique selling point. If you were to start a business today, what's your USP? What makes you different? Now, using the example of restaurants, why would your restaurant be any different? Why would your takeaway or why would your place of food be any different to all the other ones out there? They say that in business, approximately 80% of them fail within the first 2 years. So when you've got that in mind, what's going to make yours be a success? Get a piece of paper, and on that piece of paper, write down all your unique selling points of you as a person and you and your business. Now, I'll give you another example of other businesses that have done extremely well out of this. Now, we're currently in COVID, we're currently in lockdown. Clothing businesses. Now, a lot of the clothes shops, I know quite a few in Birmingham that they've decided to close their actual physical shop, but they've actually moved forward and put all their stuff online. So, question is, they've actually diversified, and these are the things that make great entrepreneurs. So in that respect, they've actually gone from one point to another. The one point is that originally they were relying on people coming into their shop. In actual fact, they've used that data of customers, and they've said, well, guys, okay, we appreciate that you can't come and see us, but how about you come and visit us anyway, but on a different forum? So we've created a website, we've got all our products on there. And I've spoken to a few people over the last week, and in actual fact, as a result of COVID, as a result of coronavirus, as a result of lockdown, it's actually made them think that, do they really still need that outgoing of the shop? Because all the customers that came to the shop have now been converted to customers who have become online customers. Their overheads have reduced massively. Their profit margins have increased massively. There are loads of websites out there. I'll just mention eBay as one of them, and there are other websites out there I should mention that by putting your stuff out on eBay initially and seeing what kind of demand you're going to get for it. It's a worldwide web, and you've moved yourself away from being a shop in Wolverhampton or a shop in Birmingham to actually a shop to the world. So when you're thinking of your customers now, you're thinking of people that previously didn't buy stuff that were just over in Wolverhampton, but now you're selling to the whole world, providing that you can get the products to them. Does that kind of make sense? Now, unfortunately, with property, you kind of don't really have that flexibility. We can't, well, saying that, when we put our properties on some of the property portals, they are reaching customers to all over the world. And so we may get contact from tenants from, that are coming into the country, or have seen our property from the other side of the country. If someone's looking to move from, let's just say, Grimsby into Wolverhampton, how else would we have done that before? If we didn't have the World Wide Web, if we didn't have the internet, how would we have reached these people before? We would have had to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on marketing to reach them. Before we were, after the break, we're going to go into a break in a second, but I'll talk to you about two different thoughts of vision. So we're going to talk about tunnel vision, and we're going to talk about funnel vision. And these are definitely things that you need to take into consideration, especially when you're going into business, because tunnel talks to you about one way of looking at it, and funnel talks to you about a different way. So we've had a message come in, and I'll actually go through that shortly. So keep your messages coming in. Again, you can call us on 01902 972 150. If you'd like to WhatsApp us, you're more than welcome to on 07440 420 432. A couple of questions that are coming in. So, Arsh, I'm thinking about starting a business. What tips would you give me from the outset? I'll cover those just shortly after the break. There's another question that's just come in and said, Arsh, I like the show. It's really inspiring. If I want to get involved in property and I don't have the funds, can I still do that? Absolutely. Remember, the only thing that's stopping you, believe it or not, is actually you. There's so many avenues for you to explore. The first thing that you do, you've got to put yourself into a mindset where you understand that it's going to be a journey. And then in that journey, you're going to come across all kinds of obstacles. And remember what I said from the outset, you've got to be able to be in a position. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the second session of Property and Business Advice with Arsh, Ellahi. So just before the break, I was actually talking about two different types of visions. Now, I'm not proud of this moment, but I was caught speeding and I had to go to a speed awareness course, unfortunately. And, I think quite a few have been there. And when you go to the course, the guys who are very good, by the way, who said, well, you've got to take it steady. Now, one of the things that I learned on this speed awareness course was the fact that there are two different kinds of visions. And this really made me think about me and my business. So I'd like you to think about this from a point of view. So there's two kind of visions that you can have. You can have tunnel vision. So just imagine you're driving through a tunnel. And when you say tunnel, you're looking literally straight ahead of you. Try this, by the way. Try this. If you're listening to this, literally look straight ahead of you and ask yourself the question, what can you see right in front of you? You can literally see the only thing that's right in front of you. Now, the next thing that I'm going to ask you to do is pretty much open your vision. Now, just imagine that you've got your hands by your head. Wide tunnel vision, literally you should have them right in front of you. Now, if you open them out so it becomes like a funnel, what else can you see? Now, it sounds really weird, but by opening your hands out, you'll actually see a lot more. Which, going back to my point before the break, say yes to every opportunity. Now, during this session here, I'm going to give you the 8 highly effective business success tips for entrepreneurs. Now, when we talk about entrepreneur, believe it or not, if you're listening to this show, you're an entrepreneur. You want to learn, you want to motivate, you want to push yourself further. So, tip number 1, keep the big vision in sight. A big vision will take you far. Now, the reason why I say that very simply is because what's a big vision? The big vision, going back to my first session, is your reason why. Why are you doing this? Or you could call your big vision all kinds of things. Now, some of us are materialistic, some of us are spiritual, etc. So in terms of the big vision, is your big vision that you want that big house? Is your big vision that you want a large car? Or is that big vision that you want lots of holidays? Is your big vision that you want a legacy for your family? These could all be big visions. And what all the things underneath the big vision are mini steps that are going to get you to the big vision. So always keep sight of your big vision. Now, if you put your big vision so far out of sight that it's unreachable, guess what? It's never going to be reachable. Which takes us on to step number 2. Fuel your vision with perseverance. Now, going back to what I said before the break, if you've got an idea and you go and ask a load of friends and they turn around and say, you know what, that's never going to be achievable. You can't do that. Why would you do that? You know, how are you going to afford to do that? Have you ever heard these? Has someone ever said this to you? How can they comment on that if they don't know themselves? That's why I say surround yourself with people who are like-minded and are positive in their approach. Now, it's all very well you approaching or surrounding yourself with lots of people that can say yes, 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 yes. But you've got to do it in a manner where people understand your vision, they've got a bit of clarity about your vision, and so they can almost come to you and say, yes, but have you thought of this? It's not a case of no, don't do it. You've got to make a plan. So tip number 3 is you've got to make a plan. Now, whenever I do anything in business, and believe it or not, this morning I'm actually looking at a different business opportunity, and believe it or not, it's not actually in this country. It's actually abroad. And the one thing that I've been doing over the last week is creating a plan for it. Now, the one thing that, admittedly, when I'm looking at this, it's in a different country. It's in a completely different time zone, completely different regulations. And I'm having to plan for all these. Who do I need to speak to? Where do I need to go? How am I going to approach this? Who are my customers now going to be? Because before, all my businesses have all been around the UK base. So in that respect, I know all the legislation. I've learnt the legislation. I know how to reach the customers. Whereas in a different country, I'll give you examples that different countries have different cultures. And in those, you have to be very respectful of those cultures to ensure that you don't offend or you don't harm anyone. And there's lots of companies out there. If you go on the internet and you type in company culture bloopers, you'll see lots of companies that have got it wrong as a result of not understanding the culture. So when you make a plan, you've got to ensure that you've done all the research behind it. And again, when you're looking at research, when you're talking about business planning, there's so many resources out there for you. Go on YouTube. Understand what a plan's all about, because in a plan, you've got to have a look at where are you now, where do you want to become, how do you get there. The plan is going to be determining how you get there. Now, the one thing I will say to you is that from time to time, things do change. That goes without saying. I don't think there's ever been a business, and let's just use the example, the circumstances where we find ourselves in right now in lockdown. I don't think there's a single business plan out there when someone created a business plan and said, you know what, let's prepare for lockdown. Because it's never happened before. We're in unprecedented times. So we can't put that in. So the best businesses or the best ones are the ones that are able to adapt to be flexible. Going back to my example before the break, a lot of the clothing shops that you see that would have been around the city now have adapted their selling method to online. So they've adapted and they've moved, they've become flexible with their approach. Does that kind of make sense? You have to be flexible. If you've had a restaurant, how many restaurants have turned around and said, sorry guys, we can't accommodate you, we can't ask you to come in and eat with us as you would have normally enjoyed. However, you can still experience our fantastic food in the comfort of your own home, and we're offering a takeaway service. So they've all had to be flexible in order to survive, and survival is key. Tip number 4 is embrace your expertise. There's a reason why you're doing what you're doing. There's a reason why I'm considered an expert in property. If you've been in your business a number of years, you've made all the mistakes. So therefore, you've become an expert in your field. You've made the mistakes. You've found a solution for them. And yet, you're still here to tell the tale. And I'm going to draw this back now to pretty much family life. Now, being a father of 2 children, 6 and 5, my 2 daughters, it's never always easy. It never is. However, tip number 2 about fueling, being persevering with it. Tip number 3 about being flexible. Tip number 4 about being the expert. I'm not the expert about being a parent, but I'm always learning. And I'm always trying to find better ways to be a better parent. And this is all comes down to empowerment. We're trying to empower our children to be the best versions that they can be so they're going to be the best versions that they can be for the future. And I'm a big believer in that. But in order to do that, I have to evolve. I have to evolve initially so that I can understand them and their needs. And talking about this as a business context, understanding your customers' needs and being flexible enough to cater to that. Taking it back to a family man, I have to be a person that can understand my child's needs so that I can become a better father. Now, I'll give you a real random example. Babies are the most intelligent human beings that you'll ever come across because they can tell you everything without actually talking. They cry because they're telling us something. It's up to us as the adults to try and figure out what that cry is. Now, some people might think, they're crying because they're just a bit bored. But in actual fact, no, I learned, being a father, that cry was that child's mechanism to teach us something, to tell us something. And then I put it down into a method of almost like, had to take it through and say, well, hang on, is the child wet? Have they wet themselves? Do they need to change the nappy? Is the child hungry? Is the child tired? Does the child need burping? Does the child want to go for a walk? Do they need some exercise? So it is pretty much a process of elimination. Business is no different. If anything, it's easier than being a parent. And, I appreciate that. If you agree with me, send me a message to that effect. But you've got to be able to be flexible enough to turn around and to suit the needs of your customer, suit the needs of your child, and embrace that. And as a result, you'll become a better business person. You'll become a better person. You'll become a better parent for it as well. Not only that, your child will then really, the way that you deal with it will also determine how your child communicates with you as well. So tip number 5. This is an important one. Don't reinvent the wheel. Have you ever heard the saying, if it's not broken, don't fix it? Why do you think in the UK that we have so many restaurants? Why do you think that we have so many convenience stores? Why do you think we have so many supermarkets? Why do you think we have so many car garages? Why do you think we have so many, car repair shops? I could go on. List is absolutely endless. If you think of all the products that are out there in the market today, they're not new products. They're just a slightly better version of the other product. So someone's seen a product. And I'll give you an example, and I'll relate this back to property. Now, one of the biggest things around multi-lets, houses of multiple occupation, is the fact that tenants kind of leave the heating on all day, every day, and the heating bills go through the roof. Unfortunately, that's a well-known fact about running a HMO, and if you're a HMO owner, I'm completely sympathise with you. Now, previously, there was a boiler thermostat. There's always a thermostat that goes with the boiler where you can turn the heat of the room up or down. Now, if you're in a multi-let or if the tenant lives in a HMO, the first thing they'll do, they'll literally turn it up to 30 degrees. They want that house to be red hot so that they can live in a warm environment. Now, I completely get that. I understand that. And go back to my point, I've understood the reason why the tenant would do that. Now, me as a business person, I'm thinking, okay, we can still have the house warm without it costing the earth, without it costing a lot of money. So how can I do that? When we look at all the products that are out there in the market right now, what can we do to make this a better solution? And companies came up with so many solutions, as HMOs increased as a property strategy. So because a multi-let produces quite good cash flow, lots of companies started thinking, well, in actual fact, what products can I create for HMOs? And once the issue came out that the houses were red hot and tenants were not really worried about energy consumption, all these businesses started coming up with solutions. There are lots of now thermostats where you can control off your mobile phone. Now, if you're the landlord, you're sat in your home and you can see that the house is actually 30 degrees, you can actually turn it down to 21 degrees, which is the legal requirement for a house to be. You can actually turn it off, but, again, this is not advice. This is literally just telling stories of what I've heard. So they've not reinvented the wheel. They've just made a better version to suit the needs of a more modern life. Look at all the things around your house. Think of all the things that you used to do. I'm just trying to think. I was cooking with my kids yesterday. All the things that we've got now, all the gadgets that we've got around the house. Yeah, how did we used to open a can before? A can of beans, for argument's sake. We had to get the old tin opener and wind it all the way around. Now you put it in a machine and it automatically does it for you. For the more modern Muslims or the more modern Asians, you've got machines that actually make roti now, or chapatis or roti. So, in that respect, we've evolved. The end product remains the same. Think about the end goal. What does the thermostat do? It turns the heating up and down. What does the tin can opener do? It opens the tin can for you. What does a roti maker do that you couldn't previously do? Previously, it was quite a manual and labour-intensive model. Now, you put the flour and the water in the machine and it makes it for you. The end product remains the same. You've ended up with a chapati or a roti. So, I'm sorry that I've used that as an example. Really poor example, by the way. Now, tip number 6. If you're a business owner or you're looking to get into business, I'm going to say it's probably one of the most important tips that you should have, or you should always have in the back of your mind. It is, don't burn out. Really, really important. Really important, because when you start a business, the first thing that, it becomes almost like your baby. You're spending all hours of the day on it. Think it. If you're not working in the business, you're working on the business. Let's just use an example. Let's just use a clothing shop as an example. Or no, I'll tell you what, even better. Let's use a convenience store. So convenience store, let's just say that opens at 7 o'clock in the morning. Before they open at 7 o'clock in the morning, what do you think they're doing? They're at the cash and carry. They're at the fruit supermarket, the fruit markets. They're picking up the flowers. They're getting all the deliveries. They're getting the newspapers in. These are all the things that they're doing before the shop opens. Then they're running the shop throughout the day. What do you reckon they're doing at the end of the day? They're taking stock. What are they short of? And then, on top of that, they'll probably go and spend a bit of time with their family. And what do you reckon they do after, when everyone else has gone to bed? They're probably paying the invoices. They're probably, doing the admin. So running a business can be extremely intense. Running a business can be, it can take over your life if you allow it to do. And I've been in that situation. Sometimes I wear my heart, not sometimes, I wear my heart on my sleeve. And I say that I'm going to do everything to the best possible ability that I have the ability to do. So therefore, I sometimes embrace it all. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it all. And, starting a business, that is great. But if you continue to do that for years on end, there's only one thing that's going to happen. You're going to burn out. And when we talk about burnout, you're going to get exhausted. You're going to get, potentially you could become ill as a result of it by spending too many hours working, not enough hours with enjoyment time and relaxing and sleeping and spending time with other people other than your business. I use a phrase pretty much most days, and I relate it back to property, but in actual fact, it's related to business full stop. Property is a marathon. It's not a sprint. For the guys that treat any property and any business as a sprint, will be the people that will be looking to make some quick cash, etc., and will burn out quickly. For the guys that treat it like a marathon, that respect it and understand that there are going to be times where you have your high times, you have your low times, and you've got times like now, like lockdown, where we have to tread water, where we have to pretty much make sure that it's a balancing act, that we've got some money coming in. We're not making money, but we've got enough money to service our overheads. Then that's what's called treading water. So that is the purpose of a business. That's the purpose. When I say the purpose of business, remember, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. We've got a long way to go. You know, for some of the businesses that want to survive, that want to create a legacy for their kids, their children, you want to have a business that's going to be running 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Just think about some of the large businesses that have been operating hundreds of years. Were they a sprint, or are they still running the marathon? And have they done all the other bits that we've talked about before? Have they been flexible? Have they embraced expertise? Have they managed to reinvent new products? Or have they literally, have they decided just to not reinvent the wheel, but modernize new products? Tip number 7, leverage everything. Now, leverage comes in many shapes or forms. Leverage comes in terms of finance. Leverage comes in terms of your workforce. And this kind of ties in with tip number 6 about burning out. By employing people, and only employing people when you're in a position that you can employ people, is that you allow and you share, not the burden, but share the work with other people. Now, admittedly, again, I'm a little bit guilty of probably still doing a lot myself. Now, and I say that, you know, with the greatest of respect, because I want to ensure that we give our customers the highest of quality. And I do that by saying that, you know, I understand what we've done, and by me doing it, I can kind of assure that that happens. But at some point, you've got to let go of that control. And this is one of the hardest parts of business owners. Now, if you're listening to this and you're a business owner, feel free to message in and say, you know what, Arsh, I completely agree here. Because letting go or giving the task to someone else, you may think, well, hang on, what if they're not doing it properly? What if they're not servicing our customers properly? What if the customer finds somewhere else to go? What if they find it cheaper? You know, all it takes is one bad review. All it takes is one negative experience of a customer, and they'll start looking elsewhere. Unfortunately, and I say this, unfortunately, we're in a marketplace where it's extremely fickle. And when we talk about fickle, we're talking about that they can literally go anywhere and everywhere with the World Wide Web, with the internet. If you find that something's not up to your standard, you'll think, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go start looking elsewhere for it. And that's the same with property. With tenants, if you're not looking after the property, guess what the tenant's going to do? They're going to say, thank you very much for Mr. Landlord, but this landlord over here seems like a better person, and they're going to look after me better. And therefore, they're going to look after the property better. Going back to my examples of a restaurant, if you go into a restaurant and the food wasn't up to standard, or the waiter or the waitress was rude, or the place was unkept, etc., how would that make you feel? One thing I'm trying to cement in all your minds today is always have the customer at the forefront of your mind. By doing that, you're always going to be in a position where you're always servicing them. Remember, customer is key. And the reason why I say customer is key, because they're the people that you need to be coming back day in, day out. Does that kind of hit home for any of you guys? So yes, you do have to leverage. You do have to leverage your time. You have to leverage against your staff. And you have to ensure that you implement enough training into your staff so that they do it to the same standard that you want it or you expect it to go out to your customer. And then tip number 8, I'm going to leave with this one because then we're going to go into a break in a minute, is that keep your sense of humor. Remember, when you're building a business, but you're also building a brand. What does that brand say about you? What does that brand say about your business? Now, when people talk about Arsh Ellahi, I like to think that they talk about me in a positive way. And they talk to the fact that they can relate to me, the fact that they've probably heard me speak at different seminars, or they've probably heard me on different channels, etc. But more importantly, I'd like to think that they say, you know what, to be fair, his message has been consistent throughout, and I've kept my sense of humour throughout. And the reason why I say that is because that's part of my brand. I'm that kind of happy chappy, get-go-lucky guy, and this has come across in all my brands. Now, if you're a business owner, let's just say that you're a convenience store shop and you're the guy behind the till, you need to keep your sense of humour, because it's that rapport that you're going to be building with your customers that come in, day out. That's going to be the success as to whether those customers keep coming. So every customer that comes in, do you know their name? Do you know what they're buying? Do you know the frequency of what they're buying? So that you can help them along the way. So keep your sense of humour, keep that rapport going, and you'll keep that repeat of business constantly. So guys, we've covered 8 tips there. We're going to go into a break in a minute, but then I'm quite fortunate to have been granted a guest. His name's Rashad, and he's going to be telling you about some of his businesses that he's built. And they are quite substantial businesses. And we're going to get into the mindset as to why he started them, where they came from, where they were born, and how he's managed to get it to the level of success that he has. So guys, I look forward to speaking. Hi guys, and welcome back to another session with Arsh Ellahi, where we're talking about property and business advice. So very fortunate that we're going to spend the next part of this show where I'm going to be having a conversation with Rashid, who has very kindly come in and agreed just to talk about a business that he's set up. If you've got any questions, now Rashid has started a business called Eurofit.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for coming in. So if you've got any questions, feel free to call us on the radio station on 01902 972 150. Alternatively, you can WhatsApp us on 07440 420 432. So first of all, thank you very much for coming in, Rashid. So do you want to tell everyone just a little bit background as to who you are and what you're all about?
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Arsh. Thank you for inviting me to Ramadan Radio. Mashallah, first of all, I want to commend those who have made the effort and the sacrifices to start this radio station. It's an absolute great opportunity for the community to come forward with their skill sets, alhamdulillah. Eurofit Auto Centre started in 2002. The aspiration come from when I was a young lad working as an apprentice at doing motor vehicles in the back of my house in the garage, and I got a little idea to go into motor vehicles. That quickly expanded to me working in a workshop, a small workshop, local to us, and eventually I continued that into a many years later into a business model where I decided with a partner as well, decided to open up our own garage. This evolved quite considerably into a small, medium enterprise. So as you could say, we employ nearly 120, 30 people. And the continuation that we also have other business models as well that have evolved from that as well.
Fantastic. Okay, so it's interesting. And one thing, I had a quick conversation with you just before we came on air. And I said, one thing I wanted to speak to you about was about empowering the Muslim and the Asian community? Because I said to you during the break that we're such a multi-talented community with such a multi-talented race. When you first started out, were there lots of people that said to you, why are you doing this?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And as soon as I made that move, I remember in 2002, it was definitely a very challenging time for me. I mean, the first and foremost thing I did do it mashura with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with this consultation dua, which all Muslims should do when they envisage a vision of some sort. So Allah subhanahu then puts ways of increasing that risk in that business. And if it's something that is not good for me, then Allah subhanahu will avoid me to get that business. So when I first started, there was people definitely, yes, of course, they were saying, look, this is a huge risk. You've never done this before, and you haven't got the credentials, nor have you got the business acumen, because with that business background, people think that these businesses are very difficult to start up and make them successful. And the next stage of that was I did seek advice from local community, business community, teachers, colleges, etc. YouTube wasn't around at that time, but this was the only source of information that we could sort of get our hands on at the time. For us, it's always going to be difficult, especially when you don't have the background. So for his father, obviously, he spent most of his life working in the factory. My mother was a housewife. So we had no sort of business acumen from the previous generation that we could have used. However, there's always someone in your life that gives you the aspiration and inspiration to take things forward. And my parents, in that regards, was very good for that. They encouraged me. They said, look, son, doesn't matter what happens. Failure is part of life, and that's such a big learning curve.
I've got to say that is absolutely spot on, and never be afraid to fail, because from failure comes education. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, my success was my failures. So everything I failed in previous to the business, it built that, evolved me to be successful when those challenges come towards me again. So I was very prepped. I was well prepped for any further challenges that I'd experienced previously.
Do you mind if I ask how old you were in 2002 when you came up with this concept?
I was age of 30.
Okay, so you've had 30 years of experience, which is phenomenal, because up to 30 years old, you would have done other businesses, you would have had other ideas that perhaps hasn't worked, but the learnings of those got you to where you were at that point.
Absolutely. Every experience in our life we go through, or we have set upon us, it's always going to benefit you later on. It will somewhere, in some form, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us in that sense. Whatever experience we learn at a young age, I mean, most of us will experience that. Later on in life, we can use that experience to get through certain difficulties, certain challenges, and this is the case for most people, and that's something we need to be aware of. Those times when we have to fail, the important thing is to, as soon as you feel that we are in that position of not succeeding, don't despair. That is the moment where you have to lift yourself up, and that's something you probably might learn at a younger age, especially when you're going to college or university, when certain you fail exams or assignments, or certain certain.
Do you mind if I ask? Are you degree educated, or did you do well at school?
No. I mean, I didn't really. I mean, I've come out. I think O levels at the time. It was the O level qualifications then, and I got 1 or 2 O levels, and straight away I went to apprenticeship program. I didn't really focus much on education until I was the age of 29.
I said last week, on this radio show last week, I said there's 2 kinds of people. You've got the academic style, and you've got those that can do. It sounds like that you're the kind of guy that just does. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I will have to agree with that.
So there are lots of people that can read books and they're fantastic at the academic side. But for me, I came out of school with no GCSEs, no A levels and stuff like that. And I just decided to throw myself into what I did. And, I'm a doer as opposed to a talker, if that makes sense. So.
No, absolutely. I mean, the way I see that is the experience of our life is our qualifications. Whatever we have had from after we left school up until now, it's part of our qualification. It's part of our development and evolvement of what we're going to be later on. So it's important that although some of the youngsters out there might not be educated, however, they'll have other talents or other ways of expressing themselves or showing some kind of skill levels or talents.
Absolutely. So going forward then, so business-wise, from 2002 to where are you today? What have you learned? And what other businesses have stemmed as a result of your learnings?
Well, what I've learned is some people have business acumen through qualifications, as you mentioned, diplomas, degrees, but some people can obtain business acumen through experience.
Yeah.
And people like yourself, probably myself as well, we gained it through experience. And I mean, there's certain situations that we've been in through business. That obviously, the business acumen is not written in a book. To be frank, it's something that you will acquire over time. Because over the years, I have studied business as well. After I completed my Eurofit project, but I realized that the book doesn't explain it the way you've experienced it. Although there is that element of guidance, but the real issue and the real success comes when you actually see and feel that time and that moment in business and those decision making skills.
Fantastic. And one of the points that I made just before the break is to become flexible. So being able to adapt to any situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got COVID-19 here. It's had a huge impact on most business in the UK. We're looking at a 14% reduction in the economy. So what we've done now is we've reduced the number of staff. I've created a sort of almost like a skill center for myself and the people around me. And we've had to look at new ways of skilling the people. Whereas before we would use majority of the staff to create productivity or a service. But now we have to change that business model. And as you said, that flexibility is important. And that's something we learned in the early days. For example, when you're starting a business, you don't employ people. And you might have heard you on the radio earlier as well. You only start to employ people when you're ready, when you think, wow, this is getting too much for me now. I need to bring somebody else in. And likewise now, we're going back to basics. So we're minimizing our staff levels and we're creating the skill sets for them to be able to, one person be able to do perhaps 1.5 person's job. So this way we'll stay afloat. I mean, to be frank with you, when I'm looking at the way this current situation is, 2020 is going to be about survival. And it's important that we survive. Profit should be the last thing on your mind at the moment. And breaking even is the main, should be the focal point.
Yeah, well, break even should be the goal for 2020 especially, because, businesses are literally just, we'll talk about the dessert industry in a second, because that could be one that you could talk to us about and how that's been affected as well. So do you want to tell us about, so you started the Eurofit centres, and that's grown to quite a size. You've had some ups and downs, I'm assuming, along the way.
Absolutely.
Is there anyone in particular that you want to talk about that was quite memorable to you?
Yeah, I mean, when we first started, after year one, we had managed to pay our debts, and we managed to sustain enough profit to put a deposit on a new site. And that site was then purchased, well mortgaged. And then the success of the first site, shall I get the success of the second? And then we started realizing that whatever we was earning in profits, we would just invest back into the business. And this quite quickly evolved into every year we had a new site. So we set ourselves a goal, not a financial goal. From day one, it's never been a financial goal. It's always been our aspirations and things that we want to do as a business and the brand we want to create. And once we'd done that, we involved ourselves in a commercial centre. Commercial centre is basically at the moment we're doing cars and vans, but we're talking now about class 1, class 2 vehicles, which is a different ball game altogether. There's a lot of space you need, a lot of rents and rates. You need skilled staff, and that business for us was a great opportunity to get into the market. However, after a year and a half, we quickly learned that it's a very difficult business, and we made huge losses that perhaps took us a year or two to recover from. But we managed to then cut ourselves loose from that and move back to the light vehicle industry.
There's nothing wrong with that. In that respect, you tried something, you put yourself out there and you said, you know what, to be fair, we're going to give this a run. And okay, it's cost a bit of money financially, but you've learnt the lesson and you've said, you know what, okay, but has it made your core business stronger?
Yeah, yes, it did. We opened 3 more branches after that, and then on top of that, we also got ourselves involved with the franchise model. So basically, Eurofit Auto Centre is an independent group of garages run by the family, which is the people who initially started it. And then we started to get this franchise model involved. So basically, what we would do, we would give all our resources, all our ideas, all our know-how, and give that to a franchise who will be able to then run his business.
Do you mind if I ask, just stopping you there? I mentioned something last week, is that part of the Asian community is worried about a level of control, and they're worried that, did anyone ever come to you and say, why are you sharing your secrets?
Absolutely. That's right, yeah. I mean, that is something that was mentioned a few times. And but for us, I mean, as initially our aim from day one was to aspire others. It was never for ourselves, because we had everything. Alhamdulillah, God give us skill sets, give us management skills, give us opportunities. My father had a house, and we had a roof over our head, so we never had the pressure of being kicked out of a property. So for me, whatever I was taught at college, whatever I was taught in the industry, I wanted to give that back. I wanted to give that back in a way that it inspired other people, and it gives other people an opportunity to do something similar for themselves. And I can give you 2 or 3 examples of that happening as well. There was a nephew of mine who was working for a dealership. I said it then. He was working for a dealership, and he come up to me and he said, Uncle, would you give me some advice on business? I said, well, I'll tell you something better than that. Why don't you come on the weekend and learn about the business? So I taught him about management, setting the hourly rates, workshop management, the business side, the accounting side, the finance, administration, which is a ball ache for most businesses. And he eventually caught that on quite quickly. After a year, he was ready. He left the dealership and he started his own business. Alhamdulillah, he was successful, and he managed to open a second business. So yes, of course, now we do get the opportunity. And even my business partner, Mohammed Suleiman, he also has the same ideas. He has the same aspirations as myself, and we're both from the industry. And this is what we want to do. We want to give something back. The success we've received over the years, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with so many good things in our life, and alhamdulillah, we want to give that to other people as well. So being selfish the way most Asians are, no, that wasn't us. No.
Yeah, so just going back on my story, my father would have said to me, he goes, why are you giving away all your trade secrets? Why are you doing that? Because I teach people, I inspire people. I've got multiple, I've wrote books and it's not about that. But it's a case of that if I can teach people what to do, they can go off and they can build a better life for themselves and their families, and as a result to create generational wealth as well. So I think it's really inspirational that you've done that, and you've now turned that into almost like another business model. You've got a training program. Is that correct?
Yeah, so quickly on from that, after we managed to get 10 Eurofit auto centres and 4 franchise centres, we then realised that the skill sets are day by day decreasing in this industry, mainly because youngsters nowadays are more involved with working with electronics. So motor vehicles have started to become a thing of the past. There are certain films, Fast and Furious, as we all know, and certain other films that aspire these youngsters, and they come in this industry with those ideas, envisaging themselves as building engines and racing cars, etc. So we are now getting an influx of now youngsters that want to get involved in the industry. We tried a number of apprenticeship programs, training schemes. A lot of them were tick box exercises. The tutor or the organisation will bring a student on board, and they will just for their qualification, they would just tick the box and say, yeah, they've conducted this particular task. And when we found that the student or the learner was coming to the vehicle, he had absolutely no idea. He didn't have the confidence. So we thought, well, why not build our own training centre? So we spent a huge amount of money and created a brand new training centre with all the latest mod cons, classrooms, computers, laptops, all the requirements you would need for a fully trained centre. Alhamdulillah, with the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have managed to be an approved centre for the IMI, which is the Institute of the Motor Industry, which is the highest qualification in this industry. So they've recognised our training centre and our training model.
I hope you don't mind me saying this, but one thing I said earlier in the show was that don't reinvent the wheel. Now, do you mind if I ask you, is your name Henry Ford by any chance?
No.
Absolutely. So in that respect, no one, everything that you've said today is that you've not reinvented the wheel. You've just made a better version of something that previously existed. Would you agree?
No, absolutely. I mean, both me and my partner, Mohammed Suleiman, worked for a national company. Obviously, I can't name the company. And we looked at the business model, and we didn't copy it, but what we did was we felt that the way they conducted their business was not the way we wanted to conduct. We wanted to give people a family feel, a welcome feel as they entered our business, and they got confidence in who they were dealing with. You weren't just a number, and as I think you mentioned earlier as well, you need to create characters with people. You have to create relationships, and you create a community in business. And once you create that community, then your marketing, your investment on making that business expand is very minimal. Then, in the first 5 years, we didn't do no marketing. Our customers was our marketing.
But I suppose your brand initially was you and your brother, or you and your business partner.
Yeah.
So in that respect, and by having that charisma, that character, people bought into you too. They didn't buy into the brand initially.
Absolutely.
Because they said, you know what, these guys actually looking after my cars, looking after our auto vehicles, they're doing a very good job. And the business repeated itself, and it repeated to a point where it snowballed to this effect where you've got multiple branches, and you've done very extremely well out of it. But you've kept that relationship of that down-to-earth customer feeling, and that's why people come back to you.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that earlier as well, and that's important to build your customer community. Well, I'll call it community because, as you said, you talk about the weather, you talk about the family, you talk about how their health, etc. So it's important we interact with our customers to a point where they're not just a number or a customer. They mean they're part of your business, and they'll recommend others. Which always helps.
Absolutely. So moving forward, so 2020 for you at the moment, it just looks like we're trying to tread water, trying to stay afloat, if that makes sense. But more important, what's the vision for the future? So you mentioned your nephew came into the business, and he started as a result of, let's just say, your coaching, your mentorship, or looking up to you. He's now started his own business.
Yes, they can mention it. Well, it started Dessert franchise. We'll just say that.
Yes. Let's keep it that. Yeah.
So it started Dessert franchise on the business model that we created initially with the Eurofeed Auto Centres, which for him it was quite a lot easier than he would have to start from a brand new business model. So he already had all the administration skills. He had already had the business acumen. He already had the marketing strategies. He had a lot of what we had initially already in his possession.
So in that respect, would you say that business, and for anyone that's listening to this and thinking, well, in actual fact, I'd like to start a business, a lot of businesses is pretty much like rinse and repeat. Would you agree? So literally, you can utilise majority of the processes and systems that you've got for other businesses.
Oh, of course. As you said, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. What you need to do is manage yourself and inspire and create a mindset of success, even if you think you're going to fail.
So there's two different types of mindset, and what I believe everyone should be looking at is a growth mindset, the ability to better themselves, the ability to think outside the box. Now, the one thing I would say is that I'm a big advocate for reading and doing lots of research on, and like you said, back in 2002 there wasn't the ability, or you didn't have the information of YouTube, etc. They've got so many opportunities to actually go off and do research and get this information available to them. Is there anything that you'd suggest to them?
Well, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head, because after we had the success of Eurofit, the Dessert franchise then did exactly that. They looked at the information available online, social media, etc., and they used that to start their new Dessert franchise. And the success of that had definitely had the hallmarks of information they'd received from all around the world, because you can see a franchise in Italy on the phone. Before you even start to make your own franchise or own idea, you can look at any part of the world and you can get certain ideas at the touch of a button. And you don't need no reading. You don't need to spend time, hours on end, to flying over to Italy and finding out how they're doing it. You just look at the information that's available online, etc.
Well, to be fair, I've learnt a lot and I've been inspired by it. We're kind of coming to close to this session. Got the last 30 seconds. Is there anything that you want to say to the guys here? If anyone wants to come out and reach out to you, can they do that?
Well, we are taking on young apprentices now. We want to aspire youngsters to come into the industry. Not only do we want them to become technicians, we also want them to become multi-testers, supervisors, managers, and business owners.
Okay.
So,
brilliant. So if they can, if that's of interest and you want to become part of a thriving and successful business, feel free